Isa Genzken. Now, I'm not familiar with that person at all.
Isa Genzken.
Isa Genzken? Don't know that one. Is it a woman or a man?
I'm not familiar with this artist. Are you?
I've never heard of it. Her?
They don't have to know a damn thing about Isa Genzken. They don't have to know her gender. It doesn't have anything to do with her nationality. It doesn't have anything to do with anything except with what you see. It's not at all a secret. It's not at all hidden.
Also ich glaube, dass sie eine der bedeutendsten Bildhauerinnen ist, die in Deutschland leben und arbeiten. Sie ist jemand, der über viele Jahrzehnte schon arbeitet und immer sehr, sehr jung geblieben ist.
I always have this question by collectors who ask you, who are the young artists you look at? And I always come back to Isa, which by age is of course not a young artist, but she's an artist who surprised me most.
Sie interessiert sich nicht so sehr für andere Künstler, aber sie wird von vielen, vielen Künstlern wirklich richtiggehend verehrt.
Few artists have more relevance than her. Like her work always seems incredibly ahead of its time.
Tatsächlich habe ich die Isa das erste Mal getroffen, ich glaube es war 1984 im MoMA. Da war die Neueröffnung, war damals eine Ausstellung von Kinnison McShine. Und ich habe von Isa wahnsinnig viel gelernt auch. Ihre Kenntnisse über Architektur, weiß ich nicht, von Lissitzky angefangen bis oder Barnett Newman oder Mondrian oder selbst Schwitters oder ich habe keine Ahnung. Das war natürlich schon für mich wahnsinnig wichtig auch.
She has this intuitive quality to out-trick an absurd social situation which deals with people, it deals with economy, it deals with history and so on. She's not detached from what's going on.
This is a person who is not happy with society as they see it and continually attempts to criticize that society. She is up to no good.
She is ultra ambitious, but not for herself. It's just towards what she is doing. My favorite film, it's a visit with her grandparents in the Bavarian woods. You can tell what it means to grow up in post-Nazi Germany and be confronted with memories and insist on knowing what your parents did. It's very tragic.
She is certainly very radical, not protecting herself nor anybody else. She is like a tsunami.
She's part of a generation of German artists who refuse to become dogmatic and didactic, and that is the political act in the work.
What Isa really doesn't like is uptightness, is squareness. There's nowhere the mind is not allowed to go, potentially.
It's a break with high seriousness. So there's a whole generation of artists like Mike Kelly and Jim Shaw whose work tries to break with high seriousness and conceptual art. So in her own way, she's doing that. And I think her work is not only deeply humorous, it also touches something that's terrifying.
In the late 1970s, I took the opportunity to propose a small exhibition of Isa Genzken's work. Recently, Genzken has done a series of red, blue, and yellow, three-dimensional ellipsoid sculptures. The artist used a computer to produce an accurate outline of the desired ellipse because the curve of such an attenuated form was too subtle to be obtained by simple visual or mathematical means. Because the ellipse is so extended, the forms seem wondrous and strange, despite their basic clarity and regularity.
Und damals muss man sich ja vorstellen, gab es ja keine Computer zu Hause. Also das musste man in einem Institut berechnen lassen. Ja? Und überhaupt so einen Angang zu machen, so zu arbeiten, ist extrem ungewöhnlich gewesen für diese Zeit.
Its form was continually changing. It followed the path of conventional Dusseldorf art at the time, and then began no longer to be able to be supported by that. It made no more sense to her.
She informed minimalist male art with something completely different, going her own way, not giving a shit.
She manages to bypass all current discussions and ask questions which are very existential.
We did not really recognize it as from the same person. She made very surprising changes in her approach. The work looks as well as ruins, as well as maquettes.
We were doing the armory, and the only person who really seemed to understand the work was this kind of funny-looking hippie. When he left, like a colleague asked me, do you actually know who you were talking to? And I said, no idea. And the colleague said, oh, that was Bryce Marden.
Deswegen, ihre Skulpturen sind ja immer nicht nur Entwürfe oder Maquettes, sondern die könnten ja auch, das ist ja bei den Betonarbeiten eigentlich ähnlich, wenn man da reinschaut, dann sieht man schon, dass könnte man sich vorstellen, dass das riesig groß ist oder so.
These concrete sculptures express unconscious fear, which most people understand without knowing it. But there it is.
The series of concrete works which kind of standard for appliances, like these radios, trying to understand the logic of these sculptures from images as a kind of student. I spent quite a lot of time on that.
Und es gefiel mir eben so gut, weil die Weltempfänger ja eigentlich ein Teil einer riesigen Skulptur sind. Also die sollen ja empfangen und senden tatsächlich zueinander.
There's some really profound decision-making process taking place, which embodies both a kind of incredible disappointment with the limit of things and at the same time an assertion of a freedom to do what the hell I want. When you're a young artist, I remember this distinctly, you would have stuff and you'd also have an idea of some kind of art to make. She decided to crash these two things into each other. This is a completely logical thing to do. You need to crash things into each other to somehow find out what they're made of. When you look at these epoxy works, you couldn't quite place it into a specific set of practices, but on the other hand, it definitely was trying to address some concerns in a sort of enduring abstraction, you could call it, like an endurance of form.
She expresses her own feelings about certain situations very much in the work. Pictures of the mind. There's a certain structure, how to think about certain situations.
Fenster ist bei ihr ein großes Thema. Die erste große Ausstellungstournee hieß ja tatsächlich, auch jeder Mensch braucht mindestens ein Fenster, was ich einen genialen Titel finde.
Everybody has a right for at least one window, or for a toilet, or for food, or clean water, or things like that. This is human rights. She's anthropologically really on the target.
She lives with that work she's doing at the moment, and there are certain themes, and then that theme is gone. She uses a language for a certain series, and then she invents a new one. I have been in Isa's studio several times, and sometimes even not finding her at first glance, but always like an adventure, always seeing something really surprising.
Whenever you go to her studio, you don't know what you will see.
One part of my job is to fix the sculptures and make them stable so they can be shipped out of the studio. I first glued these glass buildings, and all of a sudden she came around and said, well, and also there is a little polyester goat that size. And she said, could you fix these cowboy boots on the goat? It was a funny moment, but there are many funny moments there.
But it's amazing for me that she has all these kind of different rooms where she lives with the work and where she kind of creates the work for different needs with all these miniature details. And she wears things which look on everybody else completely stupid, but on her it looks just haute couture perfect.
She was always dressed in a beautiful way, a kind of leather with colors.
Funny enough, she never goes to a fitting room when she's in a shop. She picks the pants, looks at them, says, I'll buy it, and they fit.
She's my favorite dresser.
I'm often amazed at the strength that Isa has to put together these entire exhibitions almost single-handedly.
One of the reasons why she doesn't have an assistant is because assistants are usually artists themselves, and they tend to mention their opinions after a while and interfere maybe.
Ich erinnere mich, dass sie mir mal gesagt hat, vor längerer Zeit, dass wenn jemand in ihrem Atelier war und eine Installation gesehen hat, dass sie das eigentlich gar nicht ausgehalten hat, dass dann diese Person wieder weggegangen ist. Und in dem Moment musste sie die Installation wieder verändern, um es wieder zu ihrer eigenen zu machen.
There is a rigor behind her practice that makes all this freedom of expression possible.
There's no lifeguard at her side. She's really very audacious.
Ich habe die Isa hier kennengelernt, das muss 20 Jahre her sein. Und an einem Nachmittag. Und ich wusste nicht, wer sie ist. Und 2 Kellner sind zu ihr hingegangen, haben sie gebeten, dass sie vielleicht etwas leiser wäre. Und ich habe sie mir angesehen und sie hat mir sehr gut gefallen. Und ich habe gesagt, Burschen, lass die Frau in Ruhe. Die hat einen kurzen Nervenkasper und wahrscheinlich ist sie ein Enkel. Die hat nicht 25 Burschis, die da schrauben und mali mal. Ne? Okay. Gut, als Künstler ist man einsam, oder? Das ist ja kein Ringelpiez mit anfassen. Also es ist allzu oft das, aber...
Isa has an incredible sense for volume, for the amount of work that a space can take. In 2000, Kaspar Koenig gave us this giant exhibition space. I think it's 20 by 20 meters.
Both of them together visited this empty, huge space, and they started sort of dancing together.
The work was initially all about reflecting on the outside, reflecting my photographs on the wall in a central mirrored sculpture. And then from her change, I then realized there would be an optical effect happening if I placed a giant picture at the end of what now had become 2 parallel walls of mirrors.
And you walk in and you see yourself mirrored in this empty big image. So it was a kind of Versailles image von non-aristocrats.
Ein genialer Satz von Isa war ja mal, ich nehme nicht Raum weg, sondern ich gebe Raum hinzu.
Isa kam irgendwann mit ihrem Vorschlag und sagte, ich möchte diese Rose machen. Und dann, Rose ist natürlich in ihrer Überdimensionalität einerseits schön, weil alle Rosen schön sind, und andererseits auch erschreckend in dieser Monstrosität irgendwo.
Also selbst auch bei der Rose, wo man denken könnte, es ist einfach nur eine große Rose. Es ging ja darum, dass die Landschaft darum herum kleiner wird. Also, dass das Größenverhältnisse sich verändern. Das ist natürlich auch, wenn man mit Skulptur arbeitet, ein sehr wichtiges Thema. Ja?
I wanted to ask Isa, what's your message to the American public? What do you think she would have said?
I think she would say, I love New York. And I think this comes from the bottom of her heart. There is so much in correspondence with New York as a city. In Isa's case, New York is like heaven on earth.
I think her love affair with America and New York in particular comes from a sense of freedom of thought that she feels there.
She was telling us how she had just done this eye-opening tour of the outskirts of Berlin, where she had seen all the old East German buildings and run-down Bauhaus aesthetic of what it had become then, and how horrified she was. And she said, I want to call my show Fuck the Bauhaus, New Buildings for New York.
It was taking the piss out of what at one point was really avant-garde and new, and then was instrumentalized quite often for propagandistic and wrong reasons.
I would spend a lot of time walking around the city with her, and I have never experienced an artist who can see things of great diversity and put it together in a democratic way. To her, everything is a sculptural material. She would say, Christoph, look at this building. She would name the building, she would know the architect, she would know when it was built, and then go, wouldn't it be great if we put this orange stuff around it And I had dinner last night at a fish restaurant, and so I have a whole bucket full of oyster shells, and we should put that up. And I'm going to make a model of that. She turns it into an object that has this very liberating power because the materials are familiar, and yet it's something you've never seen before.
It's amazing how intuitively she can handle complex tectonic things, like being a chef, doing many things at the same time, and then bringing it together.
It was very punk, it was really tough, and it was so singular, its vision, how she was seeing New York.
Sie sieht ja die Dinge teilweise völlig anders als andere Menschen und hat vielleicht gar nicht so viel mit Kreativität nur zu tun, sondern das ist ihre besondere Art des Sehens und des Neuzusammenfügens, das ich einfach so eindrucksvoll finde, wie man diese Form des Muts über so viele Jahre immer wieder neu Ausdruck geben kann, zu neuen Formen findet.
She kept telling me about this idea of wanting to make a film, Empire Vampire. This is the late 90s. The term empire at that point had absolutely no meaning. It was outmoded. 2 years later, it was the political term. Vampire, nobody had interest in that. Now everything's vampire, from bands to films, everything. So she had that already in her head, these two words put together, that this one day would be what becomes meaningful.
I remember very vividly the Empire Vampire series when she started to use all these little toys. First it looks frightening, and the moment you really enter in, it is really extraordinary how human it is.
You really do, I think, get to see it through her eyes. Sometimes when I really look at what I'm looking at, I realize I'm looking at some kind of toy dinosaur or something like this with a bit of orange paint on it. Now, this is completely unacceptable at one level. But on the other hand, it's a deeply serious object.
The best reaction I got was actually by a collector of Isa who said, "Oh, that looks really like student work." But he meant it in a very positive way, because if somebody as a so-called mid-career artist could kind of totally rethink her idea of sculpture, I mean, that's the best what you can do as an artist.
Das Thema hieß Oil, also das, was sozusagen, wo die Welt mit geschmiert wird. Vor allen Dingen der Hauptraum mit den Koffern, wo eben die Astronauten drüber schweben, was also eine pro-amerikanische, an die Forschung, an die Zukunft glaubende Geschichte irgendwie ist, einerseits. Und auf der anderen Seite diese gefährlichen Koffer anzugucken, die heute natürlich eine völlig andere Bedeutung haben, weil da könnten ja Bomben drin sein oder sonst irgendwas. Es war dann auch tatsächlich so, vor der Eröffnung kamen dann wirklich Hunde und Dingens und so und haben jeden Koffer beschnüffelt und so. Also es hatte so eine richtige Präsenz irgendwie auch.
She just so got the experience of, one, being in Venice, but two, just being alive right now. All those bags.
Man kam in Venedig an, sah das und dachte, es trifft den Nerv dieser Stadt, die so unbarmherzig erobert wird von den Touristen, dass sie gleichzeitig auch zerstören. Ja, und das ist genau das, was sie immer wieder trifft. Sie trifft den Nerv, aber in einer ganz unglaublichen Form.
It's both extremely giving and full of content, and then somehow the work is kind of withholding and saying, look, whatever I do about this or whatever any other artist does about it, you're still going to be stuck with this situation. It's like turning the volume up or like turning up the treble or turning up the bass, which is a very odd thing to do. But in fact, for me, it's more effective than if you often make a very clear, didactic statement about something.
September 11th is something she can deal with. She's not afraid. She goes all the way.
The World Trade Center project, it's so powerful. And really so the view of a world I would love to live in.
Es ist schon ein konkreter Vorschlag für Ground Zero. Also, das wird oft belächelt, weil das Thema natürlich sehr belegt ist. Aber sie hat gesagt, bevor da wieder irgendjemand was baut, was wir wieder hässlich finden, macht sie mal sowieso einen Vorschlag, wie man es richtig macht. Wo auch eine Disco drin vorkommt, die 24 Stunden geöffnet hat. Also das ist die Betonung eigentlich drauf. Es geht um die Disco zwar, aber es geht auch um die 24 Stunden. Also, dass man immer, wenn man will, also diese Freiheit hat, dass man immer, wenn man will, in die Disco gehen könnte. Das ist auch Teil ihrer Arbeit, das stimmt.
Artists are not supposed to have authority. They're supposed to present things that if anybody is foolish enough to use in their life, they have to change their entire logic pattern. Isa Genzken seduces in a way that punk tried to seduce. I feel funny doing this kind of a talk about a colleague because in fact she requires no justification. The story is the shit that's sitting on the floor and the stuff on the wall. That's the story.
For her, the work expresses what she intends to express. And it's up to everybody to just grasp it.
Ich glaube, es gibt keinen Mensch, der eine Arbeit von Isa Genzken verwechseln kann. Es ist nie irgendwo gesehen, es ist nie irgendwo, auch nur ansatzweise, dass man das Gefühl hat, sie imitiert irgendwas, sie folgt irgendjemand nach, sie ist einfach immer sie selbst.
She talks about elementary things of mankind without being literal, leaving that space for the audience to make sense of it. It's all in there.
She gets to the essential thing. She's the world receiver. All that work about ears and the receivers, that is so what she's doing, you know, like a filter of everything that's out there. And it's just kind of coming into her way of looking at things and then coming out the other side in a really beautiful way.